2026 is not waiting for you to be ready. It will reward the disciplined and expose the distracted. By the time this year ends, some people will be unrecognizable, stronger, sharper, more focused, and others will still be explaining why they're about to start. The difference won't be talent. It won't be luck. It will be decisions made in moments just like this, because transformation doesn't announce itself. It shows up quietly. When someone finally decides they are done being average. Let me ask you a question. What if 3 days from now, your mindset was different? Your confidence was different. Your standards were different. And people looked at you and said, something about you has changed. See, most people think transformation takes years. But the truth is, transformation takes a decision. And decisions can happen today. Because you don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your identity. Day one, change who you see in the mirror. On day one, you don't need a new strategy. You need a new story. The problem isn't your circumstances. The problem is the meaning you've been assigning to them. When you say, I'm not ready, I'm not good enough, I'll start later, you are rehearsing an identity that keeps you stuck. But the moment you decide, I am the kind of person who takes action. I am the kind of person who finishes. I am the kind of person who wins. Your behavior has no choice but to follow. Identity first. Results second. Day two, change what you allow. On day two, you raise your standards. Because the fastest way to upgrade your life is to stop tolerating what no longer serves you. You stop tolerating disrespect, distraction, excuses, low energy, low expectations. Your environment either pulls you up or drags you down. So you change what you listen to. You change what you watch. You change who has access to your time. And suddenly, your thinking gets clearer. Your confidence gets louder. Your excuses get quieter. Day three, do the thing you've been avoiding. By day three there's only one thing left. Action. Not comfortable action. Not convenient action, but bold, uncomfortable, identity-confirming action. The phone call you've been scared to make. The post you've been afraid to share. The decision you've been delaying, because clarity doesn't come before action. Clarity comes from action. And when you do that one thing, your nervous system upgrades, your confidence compounds, your self-respect skyrockets. You start walking differently, speaking differently, thinking differently. And people can't explain it, but they can see it. So no, becoming unrecognizable doesn't take years. It takes one day to change how you see yourself. One day to change what you tolerate. One day to change how you act. 3 days, 3 decisions, one new identity. And once your identity changes, your life has no choice but to follow. Most people try to change their actions first. They wake up one morning and say, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to be more disciplined, or I'm going to stop procrastinating. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, they push themselves. But eventually, they fall back into old patterns. Not because they're weak, not because they lack motivation, but because they are trying to behave like someone they don't yet believe they are. Action that is not supported by identity will always collapse under pressure. Your life is perfectly aligned with who you believe you are. Not who you say you want to be, but who you see yourself as when no one is watching. Every habit you have, every boundary you tolerate, every excuse you repeat, is evidence of an internal agreement you've already made about your identity. If you believe you're the kind of person who struggles, you will unconsciously find ways to struggle. If you believe you're the kind of person who finishes strong, your mind will look for evidence to prove that true. Identity is the operating system running in the background of your life, and until it's upgraded, no new behavior will run properly. The reason identity must come before action is simple. Behavior is a reflection, not a cause. You don't act your way into a new identity, you accept a new identity, and then act in alignment with it. The moment you decide, this is who I am now, your brain begins filtering opportunities, risks, and choices differently. You start noticing things you ignored before. You feel resistance toward habits that once felt normal. You experience discomfort, not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're shedding an old version of yourself that no longer fits. An identity shift is not about hype or positive thinking. It's about ownership. It's about drawing a line and saying, the old version of me is no longer in charge. That decision changes how you speak, how you prepare, how you show up when it's inconvenient. You stop asking, do I feel like it? And start asking, what does someone like me do in this situation? That single question is powerful because it removes emotion from the equation and replaces it with alignment. When identity changes, discipline becomes easier, not harder. Confidence stops being something you chase and becomes something you express. You no longer need external validation because your actions are internally congruent with who you believe you are. And when setbacks happen, and they will, you don't collapse into self-doubt. You correct course and move forward because your identity is no longer negotiable. This is why real transformation can happen fast, not because everything around you changes overnight, but because the lens through which you see everything changes immediately. Once your identity shifts, your standards rise automatically. What you tolerate feels uncomfortable. What you used to avoid becomes necessary. What once seemed impossible starts to feel inevitable. Action finally has a foundation strong enough to support it, and momentum begins to compound. Identity first. Everything else follows. Most people believe progress is the result of time, effort, and patience, but the truth is progress is the result of decisions, not small, half-hearted decisions, but radical ones. The kind of decisions that close doors, burn bridges to old habits, and remove the option to go back. A radical decision is not a wish, not a preference, and not a goal. It is a point of no return. And the moment it's made, time collapses. Indecision is one of the most expensive habits a person can have. It creates the illusion of safety while silently draining momentum. When you delay a decision, you're not standing still. You're deciding to stay the same. Most people live in the gap between wanting change and committing to it, convincing themselves they're thinking things through, when in reality, they're protecting their comfort. Radical decision-making ends that cycle by forcing clarity. Once a decision is final, your mind stops debating and starts solving. A radical decision rewires behavior because it removes alternatives. When there is no backup plan, effort increases, focus sharpens, creativity activates. You begin to operate with urgency, not panic, because your brain understands that this path is no longer optional. This is why people often perform best under not because pressure is magical, but because it eliminates indecision. A radical decision creates that pressure by choice instead of by circumstance. What makes a decision radical is not how dramatic it sounds, but how deeply it's enforced. Saying I'll try keeps escape routes open. Saying I will still leaves room for negotiation. A radical decision sounds like this is happening no matter what. It changes how you schedule your time, how you spend your money, and how you respond when obstacles show up. You stop asking whether something is worth the effort and start asking how to make it work. Fear always shows up before a radical decision, not after. That fear is not a warning sign, it's a confirmation that the decision matters. The mind resists irreversible choices because it's wired for survival, not growth. But growth has always required a level of risk that comfort cannot tolerate. The people who move faster in life are not less afraid, they are simply more decisive. They understand that clarity is more valuable than certainty. Once a radical decision is made, your identity begins to solidify. Your words carry more weight. Your actions become consistent. Other people start responding to you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because decisiveness is visible. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't understand your direction because your commitment speaks louder than your arguments. Radical decision-making is not reckless, it's intent. Idle. It's choosing long-term alignment over short-term relief. It's understanding that the pain of discipline is temporary, but the pain of regret compounds. When you decide fully, life meets you differently. Opportunities appear that were invisible before. Support shows up where hesitation once blocked it. Momentum builds because you are no longer leaking energy into doubt. This is why a single decision can change the trajectory of an entire life. Not because the decision itself solves every problem, but because it forces you to become the kind of person who does. Once that line is crossed, going back feels unnatural. And that is the power of radical decision-making. It doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are willing to be. Every result in your life is first created in your mind, and the quality of your thinking is directly connected to the quality of the information you consume. Most people underestimate this because information feels harmless. It feels passive. You scroll, you watch, you listen, and you assume it doesn't matter. But the mind does not have a filter that separates entertainment from instruction. Whatever you consume repeatedly becomes a reference point, and reference points shape decisions. Your beliefs did not appear randomly. They were installed over time through conversations, content, environments, and repetition. If you constantly consume information that normalizes fear, distraction, and limitation, your mind will treat those things as facts. You may say you want growth, discipline, and success, but if your daily input contradicts those values, your output will always be inconsistent. You cannot think at a higher level than what you feed your mind. An information diet upgrade is not about consuming more content, it's about consuming better content. Just as your body reflects what you eat, your mindset reflects what you listen to, watch, and read. When your mental diet is full of noise, drama, and low-level thinking, clarity becomes difficult. Decision-making slows down. Motivation feels forced. But when your mental intake is intentional, your thoughts sharpen, your confidence stabilizes, and your standards rise without effort. Most people don't realize they're training their nervous system every day. Short-form content trains impatience. Negative commentary trains suspicion. Constant comparison trains insecurity. Over time, this creates mental fatigue that feels like laziness, but is actually overstimulation. The mind becomes reactive instead of proactive. An upgraded information diet restores control by reducing unnecessary input and increasing depth. Fewer voices, better voices, clearer direction. When you become selective about what you consume, you also become selective about what you believe. You stop adopting opinions simply because they're popular. You start evaluating ideas based on whether they align with the future you are building. This shift alone can create rapid internal change because your mind is no longer crowded with contradictions. Focus increases because your thoughts are no longer competing with dozens of unrelated narratives. An upgraded information diet also changes your emotional state. Anxiety often comes from consuming information that you cannot act on. Fear comes from repeated exposure to worst-case scenarios. Frustration comes from listening to people who complain without solutions. When you replace that input with information that emphasizes responsibility, skill building, and long-term thinking, your emotional baseline improves. You feel calmer, not because life is easier, but because your mind is better trained. This is why the people who grow fastest are ruthless about what they allow into their awareness. They understand that attention is currency. Whatever you give it to will shape you. When you guard your input, you protect your future self. You begin to notice that your conversations improve, your questions become more intelligent, and your actions become more deliberate. You don't need to force confidence when your thinking is supported by quality information. Upgrading your information diet is not about isolation, it's about alignment. It's choosing inputs that stretch you instead of pacify you, that challenge you instead of distract you, that build you instead of entertain you into stagnation. Over time, this discipline compounds. The way you speak changes. The way you assess risk changes. The way you see possibility changes. The most powerful part is this. Once your information diet is upgraded, discipline becomes easier because your mind is no longer working against you. You don't have to fight old narratives every time you want to grow. Your internal environment supports your external goals. At that point, progress stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like momentum because your thinking is finally aligned with the life you're trying to create. Your environment is always shaping you, whether you are aware of it or not. It influences how you think, how you behave, and what you believe is possible. Most people try to change themselves without changing what surrounds them, and then wonder why progress feels so difficult. The truth is, willpower is limited, but environment is constant. If your environment rewards distraction, comfort, and mediocrity, it will quietly pull you back no matter how strong your intentions are. Standards are the invisible rules you live by. They determine what you tolerate, what you allow, and what you walk away from. Many people confuse goals with standards. A goal is something you hope to reach in the future. A standard is something you enforce in the present. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your standards. If your standard allows inconsistency, inconsistency becomes normal. If your standard allows disrespect, it will repeat. What you permit becomes your lifestyle. Resetting your environment and standards means becoming honest about what is no longer aligned with who you are becoming. This includes physical spaces, digital spaces, and social circles. Cluttered environments create cluttered thinking. Constant noise creates shallow focus. Relationships that normalize excuses make growth feel unnecessary. When you change these inputs, you are not being extreme, you are being intentional. You are choosing alignment over familiarity. An environment reset often feels uncomfortable because it requires separation. You may need to spend less time in places that drain your energy or with people who only recognize the old version of you. This is not about superiority, it's about direction. Not everyone can go where you are going, and that realization is part of maturity. Growth demands boundaries, and boundaries require clarity. As your standards reset, your decisions become simpler. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop making exceptions that slowly erode your discipline. When your standards are clear, behavior follows naturally. You no longer ask whether you should do the work. It's simply what's expected. You no longer tolerate environments that sabotage your focus. They no longer fit. This reduces internal friction and increases consistency. Raising standards also changes how others respond to you. People can sense when your expectations have shifted. Conversations become more intentional. Time becomes more respected. Opportunities begin to align because you are no longer available for everything. This is not arrogance, it's clarity. When you know what you stand for, life adjusts around that certainty. An environment and standards reset is powerful because it works even when motivation fades. On days when you don't feel inspired, your surroundings still guide you toward the right behavior. Your standards still hold you accountable. This is why sustainable growth is less about motivation and more about structure. Structure supports progress when emotions fluctuate. Over time, the compound effect becomes obvious. Your focus improves. Your self-respect increases. Your results begin to reflect the higher expectations you've set. You no longer rely on bursts of effort followed by burnout. Instead, you operate from a stable baseline of discipline and alignment. The old environment no longer has a grip on you because you've changed the rules it operates by. Resetting your environment and standards is not a one-time event. It's a declaration. It says that your future matters more than your comfort, and your growth matters more than approval. When that declaration is made and enforced, life begins to reorganize itself around the new version of you. And once that happens, going back is no longer an option because your standards won't allow. Growth never responds to comfort. It responds to action taken in moments of uncertainty, resistance, and fear. Most people already know what they should do, but knowledge without action changes nothing. The gap between where you are and where you what? NT to be is almost always guarded by something uncomfortable. A conversation you've been avoiding, a decision you've been delaying, a risk you've been overthinking. Bold action is the willingness to move anyway, without guarantees, without perfect timing, and without waiting for confidence to arrive. Comfort is deceptive because it feels safe, but it slowly erodes potential. When you repeatedly choose what is easy, you train yourself to avoid challenge. Over time, this creates hesitation, self-doubt, and stagnation. Bold action breaks that pattern. It interrupts the cycle of delay and forces momentum. The first move is rarely clean or perfect, but it creates something far more valuable than perfection. Evidence. Evidence that you can act despite fear. Uncomfortable action rewires your nervous system. Each time you do something difficult and survive it, your tolerance for discomfort increases. What once felt intimidating begins to feel normal. Confidence does not come from positive thinking, it comes from proof. When you consistently do hard things, your self-trust grows. You stop needing motivation because your identity shifts towards someone who acts under pressure. Most people wait to feel ready, not realizing that readiness is a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite. The moment you step into discomfort, clarity follows. You learn faster because you're engaged. You adapt quicker because feedback is real. Bold action compresses time by replacing speculation with experience. Instead of imagining outcomes, you start producing them. Uncomfortable action also exposes resistance, and resistance is revealing. It shows you exactly where growth is required. The areas of life where you feel the most avoidance are often the areas with the highest return. Leaning into that discomfort is not reckless, it is strategic. It is choosing short-term unease in exchange for long-term expansion. When you take bold action, you also change how others perceive you. People respond differently to decisiveness. Opportunities open not because luck improves, but because clarity attracts momentum. Action signals seriousness. It communicates that you are no longer negotiating with fear. This shift often inspires others, but more importantly, it reinforces your own standards. Bold action is not about doing everything at once. It's about doing the one thing that moves you forward despite discomfort. That single act creates momentum, and momentum reduces fear. Once movement starts, stagnation becomes uncomfortable instead. The pain you once avoided becomes the pain you outgrow. There will always be reasons to wait. There will always be uncertainty. But bold action accepts that uncertainty is part of progress, not a barrier to it. Those who grow fastest are not fearless, they are willing. Willing to look unprepared, willing to be judged, willing to learn in public, willing to act before everything feels safe. In the end, bold, uncomfortable action is a declaration. It's say that your future is more important than your fear, and your potential is worth temporary discomfort. Once that declaration is made repeatedly, action becomes your default. And when action becomes your default, growth becomes inevitable. Success is rarely the result of a single dramatic moment. It is built through small actions repeated daily, whether motivation is present or not. Most people fail not because they lack ambition, but because their behavior is inconsistent. They rely on feelings to dictate effort. Daily non-negotiables remove emotion from the process. They create structure where motivation cannot be trusted and progress can still occur. A non-negotiable is an action you do regardless of circumstances, not when you feel inspired, not when the day goes perfectly, but even when energy is low and excuses are loud. This is what separates intention from discipline. When something is truly non-negotiable, it becomes part of your identity. You don't debate it. You don't postpone it. You do it because that's who you are. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can do consistently. Daily non-negotiables work because they are realistic, focused, and repeatable. They don't require heroic effort. They require commitment. Over time, these small actions compound into massive results. What feels insignificant today becomes undeniable 6 months from now. Non-negotiables also protect you from decision fatigue. When your priorities are pre-decided, your energy is preserved for execution. You no longer waste mental effort negotiating with yourself. The question shifts from, should I do this, to when will I do this? That clarity reduces stress and increases follow-through. Discipline stops feeling heavy because the rules are already set. Consistency builds self-respect. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, trust is reinforced. Confidence grows quietly, not through hype, but through proof. When you know you will show up daily, your standards rise automatically. You stop setting goals you don't believe in because your actions are aligned with your words. This alignment creates internal stability even when external conditions are uncertain. Daily non-negotiables also create momentum. Action taken every day, even in small amounts, keeps you connected to your goals. Momentum reduces resistance. What once felt difficult becomes routine. Progress stops feeling forced and starts feeling natural. The compound effect works in your favor because you are no longer starting over repeatedly. There will be days when your non-negotiables feel inconvenient. That is the point. Their purpose is not comfort, it is control. By honoring them during imperfect days, you train resilience. You prove to yourself that circumstances do not dictate your standards. This is how discipline becomes internal rather than situational. Over time, daily non-negotiables reshape your identity. You begin to see yourself as reliable, consistent, and disciplined. This identity then influences larger decisions, making higher-level habits easier to adopt. The foundation is already strong, so growth accelerates instead of feeling overwhelming. The power of daily non-negotiables is that they work quietly. No applause, no dramatic breakthroughs, just steady, deliberate progress. But eventually the results become visible. Others may call it luck or talent, but you will know the truth. It was built through small promises, kept daily, long after motivation faded. And once that system is in place, success stops being something you chase and becomes something you maintain. So here's the truth. Becoming unrecognizable doesn't require more time, more luck, or more approval. It requires alignment. When your identity shifts, your decisions become clearer. When your decisions become radical, your standards rise. When your standards rise, your environment changes. When your environment changes, bold action becomes natural. And when bold action is repeated through daily non-negotiables, transformation becomes inevitable. 3 days is not about the number. It's about the moment you stop negotiating with the version of yourself that keeps settling. The moment you decide that average is no longer acceptable. The moment you choose discipline over delay and purpose over comfort. If you walk away with nothing else, remember this: you don't need to become someone new. You need to fully commit to who you already know you're capable of being. Start where you are. Decide fully, act boldly, show up daily, do that. And 3 days from now, you won't just feel different, you'll think differently, you'll move differently, and the world will respond to you differently. That's how people become unrecognizable.